Over the last year or so, I've built 3 construction bots who all live in the same world. Today, I thought I would add to that collection, but this time, it's a lot smaller. I don't usually draw out my designs before building. I tend to just start putting things together and seeing how they look. But for this build, I had sketched out this little design early while brainstorming video ideas. For the main body and head, I went through my bits boxes and found these plastic caps that all fit together pretty nicely after a bit of sanding. Plastic bottle caps and spray bottle lids are some of my favorite building materials, and they're a great free way to get started in trash bot building. For whatever reason, I really like making robots with one eye. Like 95% of the robots and droids that I built only have one eye, so I'm going to stick with what I know best and also give this robot one eye. I'm using this piece of a broken pen as the eye, and I'm using a Dremel tool to carefully shape the back side of it to help fit to the curved shape of the bottle cap head. For the lens, I'm going to use a googly eye, but with a twist. I'm just going to use the clear plastic shell and cut the rest away with an X-Acto blade. So I'm just left with that little clear plastic part that fits over the googly eye. Now, the lens is going to be filled with UV resin and then cured with a UV light, and I'm just using a few drops here. I'll add the lens back to the eye at the very end once everything is painted and weathered. I'm also going to add this strip of styrene around the top bottle cap to cover up those ridges. This will add some detailing, but it will mostly just make it easier for me to add the decals later because water decals work much better on smooth surfaces than on ridged surfaces. This little plastic circle will be added to the top of the head and will be the attachment point for some antenna that I made from various pieces of metal tubing. Moving on to the legs, they're built almost entirely out of these styrene strips that are held together with these small brass rods that will act as the joint pins. I cut the styrene into 4 pieces per leg, one 2-inch, 2 1/2-inch, and 1 1/4-inch piece. I round over the corners of each piece, starting with cutting them off and then refining the shape with a sanding stick. I refined the shape of the 2-inch section to make it a bit more pointy and to make the legs less bulky and a bit more spider-like. I'll drill holes the same size as the brass rod at each end, and then I'll cut a short section of brass rod to attach all the styrene together. Once the legs are assembled, I can cut the rod flush against the styrene, and then I'll cover the ends with a rhinestone to make it look like rivet heads. Now I don't glue the rods in place so that the legs still have full motion, I just glue the rhinestones down on top just to sort of cap them in place and sandwich everything together. This allows the legs to be posed into whatever position I'd like later, because at this point I'm still not sure exactly how I want them to look. The legs will be attached to the smaller white cap at the bottom, but I need to go through the green cap, so I cut out notches in the plastic to fit the styrene legs. This will help cover the connection points, but it will also add some stability to the legs. I'll add some metal pins to the legs as well to add even more strength. At this point, I can also figure out what position I want the legs in and then lock them in place with some thin superglue. I'll keep the body and the head and the legs all separate for now to make painting easier. All the parts get brushed down with a wire brush to make sure that the paint layers stick. To To start the painting process, everything gets a coat of flat black primer and then a coat of white. I'll be using this Vallejo Moon Yellow and my Gallery Mobius 0.3 to cover the entire robot in this yellow. If you're interested in this airbrush or anything else from Gallery, I have links in the description to their website as well as a coupon code for 10% off your order. And now that we're in the painting process, I think it's a great time to give a shout out to all my patrons over on my Patreon. Thank you all so much. Your support really helps me so much in purchasing materials for new builds and keeping this channel going in general. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in joining my Patreon and helping me build this channel and also getting a shout out in every video, you can do so over on my Patreon. I'll have links at the end of this video, in the description, and on my page. By joining the Core Builders, not only do you get a shout out in every video, but you also get access to progress photos and other teasers that no one else gets to see. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing and want to help for absolutely free and right now, you can do so by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, all of that fun stuff that helps the YouTube algorithm pick up this video and show it off more. This is just one of many, many videos that I have on my channel, over 150 to be exact. So if you are liking this, after this video is done, go check out my other stuff. I'm sure you'll like at least another video or two. I'm using this black paint pen to add some detail and just to try to break up all of that yellow on the legs. I break out my ever-growing collection of water transfer decals and I start adding a few around the build. The number 4 is just to show that this is the 4th construction bot in my series. These decals add so much great detail and scale to these projects, and they've definitely been a little tricky to apply, especially the smaller ones, but with more practice, I've been getting a lot better. Once all the decals have been attached, I seal all of it in place with a flat clear spray paint, and I also attach the head and the body together at this point. This weathering is very similar to many of my builds nowadays. I start with a black wash, which is a mix of black acrylic paint mixed with water and a few drops of isopropyl alcohol. This is the first layer of weathering, and because it's liquid, it gets into all the corners and low points that the next step has trouble with. The next weathering layer is these Tamiya Weathering Master palettes. I use a makeup sponge brush and mix the oil stain and burnt rust into a rusty grime color. I'll apply this color over the entire robot, working into the corners first and then moving on to the flat surfaces. Now this step is sort of the opposite of the last wash because it's focused on the raised highlights and doesn't get into the deeper corners and panel lines like the more liquid wash does. These compressed pigment kits are really great and they last a long time. Now they definitely show up more on lighter colors like this yellow or white, but they do also work on darker colors, they're just not as obvious in the end. I'm still going to add a bit more weathering, but I'll do that after I've attached all the legs permanently in place. I'll just use a bit of super glue and attach them like this. Having everything together like this will help the next few weathering techniques in connecting the robot and making it look like it was getting all scratched up and dirty as one functioning robot all put together. Using the same gunmetal silver as before, I add these paint chipping effects along the edges of the panels. I tend to stick to the edges because, just like in real life, that's usually where the weakest paint is and where you're most likely to scratch it off. As I mentioned before, this bot is part of my construction line, but I'm actually not sure what job it would have. In the past, you all have come up with some really great ideas for these bots I've built, so let me know down in the comment section what you think this bot's purpose is. The last stage of weathering I add is the rust. I mix up a little batch of rust wash using those 2 paints that I showed earlier, and I start applying it into the corners and joints, but as usual, I get carried away and end up covering almost the entire bot in a thin layer of rust. It does help that I started with a pretty thin rust wash, so I don't end up covering all of the nice yellow paint I added. The final step in assembly is to add that red eye that I painted earlier, and then I add the googly eye resin lens on top. And just like that, we're done. Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that build. It was definitely fun to build another small bot this week. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them down in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you. I read every single comment and I try to respond if I can. I'll have a link in the description below to my Amazon storefront with many of the tools and materials that I use to make these videos. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.